Hello there guys, and welcome to another review. Today we are reviewing the Safari Limited 2017 Feathered Velociraptor. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, the pose. Now this figure has both of its arms hanging down, kind of a little bit more extended past what would be the natural position for them, because like this arm, this bendage was about the natural position. It's just it should be pointing a little bit farther back, more like how far back this one is, and this one should be tucked in a little bit more. And then for this side, the leg is outstretched all the way, and this one is pulled back all the way. It really gives you the feeling that this figure is walking quite fast, like it has places to be. It's not necessarily running, but it's definitely at least trotting to get where it needs to be. It has its mouth open, and I guess there's a number of things that you could interpret it's doing. Like maybe it's calling out to another pack member, maybe it's trying to bite at something, but if it was trying to bite at something, why be walking? I don't really truly know. But I mean, I guess you never know. It definitely is a very nice pose. It's not the most dynamic pose that has ever been accomplished, but still looks very nice. One thing that I do have to complain about with the pose is it is like a quadruped. Not on mine. This wing doesn't touch the ground, but it is a quadruped. And one thing that I know at least Bioniclesaurus said is happening to his, so it's clearly not just on mine, but this foot on mine, if I can zoom in a little bit there. So one of the issues is this foot over time has been warping upward, and this really just makes it so this figure is very, very unstable. Almost every single time he falls so incredibly often. Mine, at least, despite being a tripod, is really not all that stable. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 on the pose. It really is very nice. It could have been a little bit better, but still, good job, Safari. Next up, the detail. This figure is absolutely astounding in its detail. Every single feather on this figure is sculpted. All along the underside of the tail, all along the top of the tail. And one thing I like is every now and then you get kind of like what looks like a mishap in the tail feathers. They don't look perfect, which I really like because they're not entirely perfect on a real animal. The feet of the figure also have individually sculpted scales all over them, which is very nice. It has some scales on the hands, and when we go on to the inside of the hands, you can see it doesn't have as much detail on them, but it has some. Here's a look at the other one. Moving on to the snout, the only other scaly part on the figure, it also has individually sculpted scales over most of it, kind of like with the hands. The hands don't have it all over them. This one has it a lot more thoroughly though. But one thing that is a nice detail is how the feathers just kind of nicely fade into the scales. It really does look very natural, very, very nice to see. I mean, it just looks really, really good for all the detail. So I'm going to give this figure a 9 out of 10 for the detail. On some of the scaly bits, the scales just kind of fade into obscurity and aren't really there at all. But other than that, it is very well detailed. Next up, the paint job. The paint job is this lovely, lovely, like a ruby red color with this nice darker dry brush on top. And that really helps to bring out the detailing of the feathers. because like the detailing in the feathers doesn't quite stand out as much on this white area because it doesn't have that darker dry brush on it. But up here it does, and it really brings it out. The more flight feather-like feathers have this nice brown, dark brown, blackish gray color with all these white dots running all the way along them. Same thing on the wings. The scaly bits are this green color, kind of like a lizard. It's kind of like a nice contrast. It's, you know, most of the time Velociraptor is depicted with scales and not feathers, and this is really, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of like this nice throwback to like the old times with this very stereotypical reptilian color. And then when we go on to the claws, one thing that Safari Limited doesn't often do is they don't often weather their claws or anything like that. They don't look like the animal has been out in the wilderness, but the paint job on the claws really does make them look very nice and weathered, even on the front claws as well. It really does look very nice, and something that Safari doesn't often do. Up on the top of the head we have this nice like gray cap with these two white stripes. Now the tongue and the little skin flap thing are painted this pink color, which is very nice. Also, we have a nice gum line that's painted there as well, which is very nice to see. The teeth are painted good for the most part, except on this side where the coloration of the gums kind of bleed onto the teeth, which is unfortunate. And the other really major problem with the figure in general is the eyes. The eyes, this eye's kind of looking off that way, not very focused. This eye's also kind of looking behind it. It really just doesn't look very natural. Almost every single one of these figures that I have seen at least have this problem, which is really truly very, very unfortunate. I mean, I don't know why they all have this problem, but they do, and it's very strange considering that they normally do the eyes on their figures really, really well. And one thing that I'd also like to point out on the tail, when I first got it, I was like, dang it, has all these paint scuffs all along the edge of the tail. But then, when I started seeing other people's figures, I realized that these aren't paint scuffs. This is actually paint that was painted on. Kind of like with the darkness on these feathers, they instead chose to do white on the tail, which is very, very interesting. So overall, I'm going to give its paint job a 9 out of 10. It really has been done very well, but except for the teeth and the eyes, which are very commonly messed up upon, it appears on the figure, which is very, very sad, but the rest of it really is painted very, very well. So now we're in the scientific accuracy, which is the section that this figure succeeds most in, and the reason why is because I can't find anything wrong with it. I mean, to start off with, it's fully feathered, it has full bird-like feathers, it has a wing that's actually properly done. So many times you see the wings done wrong. On the Collecta Utah Raptor, the wing kind of like points out sideways and it's very small. It looks really weird. On the Papo Velociraptor, the wing doesn't extend really all the way down the arm. This one is done correctly. It has the primaries and the secondaries. They come off of the second finger, hiding the third finger underneath the wing. I mean, it's just incredible, the accuracy. The head is done correctly with the dip in the skull. The feathering goes all the way down the tail, which from a relative of Velociraptor called like Zoo Wing Long, something like that, has this going all the way down the tail, which is why we think that it had this. The feet are scaly, the hands are scaly, and the snout is scaly. The only part that should be scaly. The teeth are small. It's got a nice thick neck because of the floofiness of the feathers. The neck is actually a lot skinnier than this, but feathers really add on a lot of floof. Like chickens, for example, have really, really skinny necks, but you never know it just by looking at them because the feathers add so much floof. I mean, oh my gosh, it's perfect. I cannot find one thing wrong with this figure. I mean, this is insanely impressive, Safari. Good job. Great job. This is amazing. So, and I bet that there was no surprise here, this figure gets a perfect 10 out of 10 when it comes to accuracy, at least according to our current knowledge. Now, before we get to its overall score, let's go over how big it is and do some size comparisons. So this is about, I'm starting off with centimeters this time. This is about 21 centimeters long, which is about just over about 8.5 inches long. See, there he goes. He's not very stable. He is about, at the top of his head, about 7.5 centimeters tall, which translates to just under 3 inches tall. Now, for the constant for size comparisons, I couldn't really use that this time because, well, this guy is our constant. So I've instead decided to use for this one Bioniclesaurus's constant, the Safari Limited 2015 Utyrannus. And as you can see, these two are pretty much the same size. They're basically the same height and same length. Next up, the other feathered figure that people went absolutely crazy for when it came out, that came out the same year as this one, the Safari Limited 2017 Feathered Tyrannosaurus Rex, which, as you can see, is a fair bit larger than the small little raptor. Again, definitely not in scale, but I mean, this could work as like maybe a abnormally large Dakota raptor or something like that. And now for the tiny figure that we reviewed last time, the Collecta 2017 Ionosaurus. So overall, this figure gets a 9 out of 10. It really is very good and is outstandingly accurate. If you get your figures based on how accurate they are, get this one. It's so rare for a figure to actually be accurate, or at least perfectly accurate. You know, most time they're mostly accurate, but not all the way. This one is perfectly accurate according to our current model. I mean, again, if you go off accuracy, get this one. But on the other sections, it really is pretty good, but it's not outstanding, which is why it gets a 9 out of 10. But anyway, guys, that is it for this review. Dino Man, out.